Happy Valentine's Day, you Nightmare nerds, and welcome to the latest episode of Nightmare Revisited. Everyone has that special Halloween movie from childhood, the one they make a tradition out of watching every October. With growing popularity of Hocus Pocus, I'm returning to my own special movie that makes me roll with laughter and shriek with terror, Ernest Scared Stupid. Welcome to Nightmare Revisited. Hey all you Nightmare nerds, and welcome to the latest episode of Nightmare Revisited. As you heard from the intro, today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite all-time childhood movies, Ernest Scared Stupid. But first I want to wish each and every one of you a happy Valentine's Day to you and your significant other. And if you do not have a significant other but you want one, I'm sure it's right around the corner. And if you're happy being single, guess what? We respect your strength, and that's awesome too. But on a day where we're supposed to be celebrating love, I want to celebrate my love of Ernest Scared Stupid with all of you. And in tradition of Nightmare Revisited, we're going to start off talking about how I first saw this movie and kind of the relationship that I've had with it over the years. So we were obviously a big movie household growing up, and we had just a huge collection of VHS tapes. So at any time we wanted to watch something, we had this awesome wooden cabinet that we would click, we would open it up, and it was just a huge collection of VHSs. And most of them were collected before my time, I would say, because I was the youngest of five. So a lot of these movies, I find that my childhood tastes really kind of come in the late 90s, early 80s in terms of like movies that define my childhood, mostly because all my older sisters and brothers, they were watching the same types of movie, and it kind of easily got, kind of passed down to me as well. And I think one of the great kind of entertainment pieces in our household were these Ernest movies. And I remember very early on we had a recorded VHS copy of Ernest Goes to Camp. So that was my first kind of introduction to the character of Ernest. Now, Ernest, if you don't know, was actually made famous through a series of ad campaigns. There were localized ad campaigns in the South in the 1980s, early 90s, and he was kind of made famous and popular because he would always address the camera as Vern. So, like Vern, like Ernest is your neighbor, your annoying neighbor that has all of these, like quirky attributes, and you're Vern, right? And so you're kind of dealing with him as you're watching the commercial. So, hi Vern became very, very famous towards Ernest lore, and eventually led to the creation of these movies because they became so popular. So it led to the creation of Ernest P. Worrell, and his first exploration into film was Ernest Goes to Camp. And I remember watching that as a kid and just absolutely loving Ernest because... So as I was rewatching Scared Stupid, the one thing that I found really great about the character is that he has a lot of respect for children, which is something that I don't know if we experienced in like a slapstick comedy kind of way at that point in time. I feel like there was kind of a separation between like educational and lesson learning like children's shows and like almost like Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and stuff, where like something needs to be funny as well, like engaging for the children as well as kind of educational. And then you have like the other end of the spectrum where we're talking like Ace Ventura spin-offs of children's shows that are just kind of wacky and wonky and are these weird kind of adult figures that we associate with childhood. And I think Ernest fits that mold, except where I feel like it's different is that Ernest has a respect towards children that I really, really, really appreciate. He always takes like children's problems very seriously, and I enjoyed the way that the children had a relationship with Ernest himself as well, because even in Scared Stupid, we have these examples where the kids need a treehouse because they're being bullied. And their parents, almost in the vein of like traditional horror movie, which we'll get to in a little bit, the parents are like kind of vilified in this movie because they don't seem to show any sympathy at all towards their own children, whether or not they're being like the police chief dad straight up knows that his son is being bullied by the mayor's two kids and just kind of doesn't do anything about it. And so the relationship that they have with Ernest is almost like he's one of the group, but also Ernest is able to give these kids like the respect and attention that they need, right? He straddles that middle ground between, like adult and child. And obviously he fits that kind of archetype of the man-child, right? But he's able to do things that they aren't, right? He's able to help them. He's able to help them build this treehouse as a means to, for the high ground, to get away from their bullies. And even in other movies, like he seems to like really kind of provide pathways for kids through kind of difficult growing up emotional points that I think is really cool for Ernest. So for me, it was always really cool watching the Ernest movies because I felt like I had that adult friend, right? That could, that could maybe identify with me better than my parents could. Not that, they were doing a bad job of identifying with me, but, it was almost like you had a bit of a vision into your own future where you hoped you could become this adult, but still have this kind of innocence and connection to it. And I think he represents a kind of, adulthood that you don't really see a lot in these kind of movies. So you have this figure of Ernest who's becoming famous from all these ad agency campaigns, and essentially they see this opportunity to kind of make him more of a figure and turn him into this franchise character. And John Cherry, the director of all the Ernest movies, he was the original ad executive that was kind of in charge of getting all of these Hey Vern campaigns. So here it comes to the late 80s, early 90s, and you get Ernest Goes to Camp, which I always really enjoyed as a kid. I always felt like it might have been a little more like teenage focused than it was, kind of my age, like child focus. And I think that once, like John Cherry and Jim Varney kind of figured out like, okay, I think we can make a lot more traction moving towards, children than it was kind of like a teenage movie, that they really started to become popular. And so you had Ernest Saves Christmas, which is another fantastic holiday movie, come out, and that was actually incredibly popular, made a lot of money. And so John Cherry got he had a 3-picture deal with Touchstone from Disney, and that kind of extended into a 6-picture deal, and it turned into kind of this evolution of child media that I think we were seeing at the time, where it was like, okay, we have this identifiable figure, this identifiable IP. Let's make, like a movie for each holiday, right? And I think like Halloween was the next thing up on this list. So flashback to childhood me. If you think I had a lot of VHSs, which I think I had a lot of VHSs, but they had like walls to walls VHS tapes, and I used to annoy them so much because I would always go over there and like beg to borrow VHSs. They were kind of like my own personal blockbusters. Hey guys, if you're listening to this right now, thank you very much for being my own personal blockbuster for so very long. And they had all of the Ernest movies on DVD. And I remember like a 2 to 3 month stretch of like 5-year-old me walking over to their front door, ringing the doorbell and being like, I'm bringing back Ernest Goes to Jail, which by the way is a literal comedic masterpiece in case you need something to watch this weekend. I'm ready for the next one. And I got to Ernest Scared Stupid, which immediately I was drawn to. Obviously I had this kind of fascination with horror as a kid. I probably saw it, like Tim Curry's It, for the first time before actually seeing Ernest Scared Stupid. But I think I had this cognitive level in my head where I was like, all right, well, like, it is not made for me. I'm aware that this is like an adult story. And Ernest was an access point to me for the genre, which I think is kind of the beauty about this movie. Ernest Scared Stupid to me is a truly terrifying, at its core, horror movie, while at the same time being easily accessible for children because it is light and it is fun and it has this figure who is kind of, making the best sort of environment for the children in the movie. And to me, that was something that was really cool. And I think if you need any more indication as to how this movie is like a really actually serious kind of well-constructed horror movie, it was the fact that this movie was the last Ernest movie to have a theatrical release. It did not live up to the expectations that Ernest Saves Christmas had, which made a very good amount of money at the box office. And so after Ernest Scared Stupid came out, the franchise actually moved toward VHS home video distribution, which birthed kind of a whole random slew of like additional Ernest movies, like Slam Dunk Ernest and Ernest Goes to School. And you can see the production value from it drop a little bit because they kind of realized, like, okay, this is more geared towards kids. They're very successful on home video. Let's try to kind of steer the direction of this franchise towards that level of distribution. But Ernest Scared Stupid did have a theatrical release, and a lot of people associated the drop-off in box office to the fact that the movie was actually too scary for children. And I can 100% see that, because as a kid, I was terrified of this movie. So the first scene in this movie that stuff really, really gets super serious with is, so, the whole plot is that Ernest awakens the Trantor the troll from the tree that they build the treehouse in, and Trantor needs 5 souls of children before midnight on Halloween to awaken his troll army and take over the world. So Ernest, being Ernest, of course, taps his fists on the tree in which Trantor is trapped, and gives this awesome "I call thee Trantor." You'll also note that this is the most quotable movie I've probably ever seen. And Trantor is now in the world, and the first person that he picks off is Joey, which of course it had to be the nerdy friend that gets picked off first, as typical with the horror genre. And so there's this kind of chase scene through the woods with Trantor, and he falls down this Joey falls down this mudded hill, and there's actually voice mimicry in this movie, which is so creepy. Like, the troll is able to steal the voices of other people and use it for emotional manipulation with other characters, straight out of a poltergeist or demon movie. Like, that's something that, people are like, well, demons can mimic the voices of your loved ones. So we have voice mimicry going on, which is super terrifying. And the Trantor pretends to be Ernest to get this kid's hand. And when the kid looks up, we have a reverse shot, and of course Trantor's holding him. And he turns the kid into a wooden sculpture. Like, to me, that was terrifying. As a kid, I was so scared of being turned into a wooden sculpture by a troll. And I don't know what this says about me, but I think at the time, it was like the first time I was experiencing like existential dread of me terrifying my personal spirit, my soul being like stuck in isolation in this obscure like in between of having consciousness but being stuck in a wooden doll. And that's a little much for like 5 to 8-year-olds to deal with in a horror movie. But even as an adult, it was terrifying. And I think the effects in this movie are actually pretty good. Certainly the makeup effects. All of the troll makeup was done by the same makeup artist that did Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which is another absolutely terrifying movie. And you can kind of tell with the army of trolls at the end, their makeup and design are similar to the actual clowns that are in that movie. And also like the evaporation animation when they die, when they get covered with milk, it's actually the same as with the animations in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So we have legit horror craftsmen like helping to work on this movie and succeeding miles and miles and miles beyond that of a normal like child quote unquote horror movie. Like comparing this to like Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, which I think was like the gold standard at the time of like child horror, it's night and day. And I think this whole transformation of these children, and there's one scene where the main character, the kid, turns around and watches his friend be in frozen status, he's in like a Native American costume, and frozen in status, turned into this wooden doll in front of his eyes, and it like reverse shots to the main kid, and he's like, "Oh my God, I do not want that to happen to me." So there's parts of this movie that are just beyond terrifying, and I think part of that attributes to its lack of success at the box office at the time, because kids didn't want to see it because it was too scary, and you could probably tell during the trailer too. It's quite a terrifying experience. And you can kind of tell through the production process that John Cherry, who, up until this point in his career is very used to making, advertisements and children's movies, geared towards like a family kind of audience. And so he's like kind of dipping a toe into horror filmmaking. And the first thing he does was like, all right, well, we need to get the production designers from Killer Clowns from Outer Space to make this truly terrifying. He adopts something that I don't see in any other Ernest movies, and trust me, I've seen a lot of Ernest movies very frequently over the years. But he adopts like handheld camera in this movie, which is something I noticed immediately and thought it was really, really cool, because it's something that I know he hasn't used before. All the Ernest movies are very like, slick and make sure we're on tripods or dollies, make sure we get like standard coverage. And I think John Cherry like really, really, really embraced the idea of making a horror movie to the point where he's incorporating these different typical horror movie techniques, like these handheld cameras that are pushing in and following the action, in really intense ways. Also, the shutter angle on the cameras in this movie are like cranked out the butt. Like the movement is so sharp, and it's not something you typically associate with, these family-friendly kind of ha-ha Ernest movies. So, we have this kind of crazy production design. The cinematography changes. The music in this movie is really funny and kind of really spooky. And we're going to get to just the absolute magic it is of watching Ernest do a waltz with a troll towards the end. But it's something that I really respect and I really appreciate coming back to it, is watching this filmmaker who, up until this point, has done a lot of literally commercialized stuff, whether it was commercials or, creating these, kind of happy kids movies, embracing a genre and doing everything he can to give it hell and give it a real sense of belonging in the horror genre. Now, I want to take a moment to stop and really talk about the comic genius of Jim Varney, the late, great Jim Varney. So, Jim Varney, as you may or may not know, he got famous for the Ernest movies, and he was in a lot of other, family-friendly movies. He was a really great kind of physical as well as impersonation type comedian, and he went on to play Jed Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies reboot for Disney, and he was in a lot of Disney Channel originals like Treehouse Hostage was a really funny one. And something that we all know him from, probably his claim to fame aside from the Ernest movies, is that he was the voice of Slinky Dog in Toy Story and Toy Story 2. Unfortunately, not Toy Story 3. Jim Varney passed away in 2000, I believe, from lung cancer. And you could tell when he passed away, he was really respected by the community, both for his, comedic personality and the works that he created for children, but also the relationship that he had with children as well. So Jim Varney, to me, is like gold standard for children's entertainment. I remember watching Ernest Goes to Jail. It was one of the first Ernest movies I had seen after It Goes to Camp. And there's this scene in that movie where Ernest tries to break out of prison dressed as Auntie Edna, the old lady. And it is literally the funniest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. If people ask me, if I had to list a funniest scene ever shot in the history of cinema, it would probably go like Duck Soup, the mirror scene, the dancing biscuit scene in Gold Rush, and Ernest trying to break out of prison dressed as Auntie Edna in Ernest Goes to Jail. That's how highly I think of that scene. So it's great to watch him bring that kind of comedic hilarity to this horror movie of Ernest Scared Stupid. And one of the scenes that really, really shines for me is the story of Botswana. So you have this, the main kid character, his name's Kenny. He goes to Ernest while he's changing a tire in his garage. So he has this jack that he's like pushing up the car, and you can tell that the jack is like not able to handle the weight of it at all, but Ernest doesn't notice because he's so concerned with giving the performance of his life, explaining how the tiny nation of Botswana was able to hold off the Ottoman Empire, and he's comparing this to, like the kid having bully problems, which in itself is an amazing comparison and, like allegory, but he breaks into these different characters that he has. So I love it because it cuts away to Kenny, and Kenny's like watching this happen, and so it's like the shots that feature Ernest in it are always changing color, and he's changing costumes, but they're all like a conversation in between in and of itself. And it turns back to Kenny, and Kenny's just like watching this all happen. Like it is an actual diegetic thing that's happening within the movie. Like Ernest has a superpower that he's able to change personalities like over and over and over again. And so now I have a film theory that Ernest is in fact a superhero because one, he clearly can't die. In this movie, he gets crushed by a trash compactor, impaled by a literal 12-foot long bear trap, and he's still like, no, don't worry, I'm totally fine. He gets demolished by a car while inside of it like a metal trash can. Ernest is clearly invincible, and that is his superpower, but he also apparently is able to, via Dr. Manhattan, split himself into multiple areas and personalities, at the same time. And so we have, Kenny watching this amazing transfiguration of all of these personalities embody itself. And the whole time I'm just thinking, Jim Varney loved doing this. You could tell he had so much fun. And, he switches to Auntie Edna, the legendary Auntie Edna, who tried to break out of prison. There's the Botswanian lumberjack, which has the greatest line in the entire movie. So they're trying to say that they need a treehouse to get the high ground, but that there couldn't be any tree houses in Botswana. And then Botswanian lumberjack Ernest pops into the screen and goes, "Oh, there ain't no trees in Botswana. I know. I am a Botswanian lumberjack, and I ain't never had a job." And every time I hear that, I get that burst of serotonin into my brain, and I laugh, and I can't stop laughing. It's just so smooth and quick, and the pacing is so great. The comedic pacing of the scene is amazing, and it's something only Jim Varney could do, and I feel like he's so underappreciated as a comedian because he was limited to these kind of obscure kid movies that came out at a very specific time that were, it's kind of a very specific zeitgeist of Ernest. But he does some really amazing stuff. And when he's trapped in the trash compactor, he there's a trash compactor trying to squish him, and he's using all of these things to try to prop it open. And he picks up the little rubber doll's head and needs to have a conversation with the doll before shoving him into the gears. And he's like, "Oh no, don't do it, Ernest, please." And to me, it's just such a great vision into Ernest. It's like his beautiful, innocent personality where he's using an inanimate object to try to save his life, knowing he's going to destroy it, but still needs to have a conversation with it to kind of emotionally rationalize in his mind doing anything destructive. And I think that's so cool about Ernest. And I guarantee, you guys did not think I'm going to turn into this Ernest Scared Stupid podcast and listen to Mike give a retrospective on the comedic genius and emotional intelligence of the character. But yet here we are. Welcome to Nightmare Network. But as he's doing all of these different impressions, and I even have evidence that this is a real thing. At the end, Kenny, he does a reprise of this when they're actually in the high ground and they're fighting all of the trolls that are around in the trees. And Kenny says something to him like, "Oh man, I can't believe I have to deal with trolls and multiple personalities." So there's literal cinematic evidence in this movie that Ernest is a superhero, and that his super ability is the ability to make real and transmogrify his personality into different facets and identities, and use them as to weaponize against an army of trolls. which is fantastic. But the other thing that goes along with this is there's this awesome shot where finally the jack that's been holding up this car while Ernest is doing his whole spiel about being a Botswanian lumberjack, and it shoots out and it hits the back of the mayor's car and shatters the window. But as it's going, there's this sound effect that's like as it's going, and every one of the personalities looks left to right as it goes. Like, it's such a funny shot where it's like Ernest goes, "Oh my god," and then each corresponding personality looks to see it go, as if they're all existing in the same like space at the same time. And that's really good filmmaking. Like, it really is. It's really good construction of a visual construction of a psychological idea, and just having that simple look left to right, look left to right, look left to right. It makes the effect and the illusion so much more salient for us to pick up as viewers. And so it makes me really happy when I see these Ernest movies who are silly and quickly written and but you can tell the people in it really care about it and really love the character, and you find these little nuggets of great filmmaking inside of it. And to me, that's something that makes me really happy, that I really love. And I think Ernest Scared Stupid is kind of the amalgamation of all the Ernest movies. I think Ernest Scared Stupid has the best examples of filmmaking, because there's so many different parts of it that fit so well. The production design in this movie is actually fantastic. And I know we already talked about the fact that the makeup effects and everything were made by the people from Killer Clowns from Outer Space, but like the Hackmore place, it is really effective and terrifying. The set that they built for the treehouse is so atmospheric and works really, really, really well. And I learned that they made it in like an abandoned factory, and they like brought in tons of dirt and insects and plants to make it all seem very real and diegetic. Just the overall atmosphere that the movie creates. Like, it's very obvious that it is a kid's movie and it was made with the scope of a kid's movie, but it incorporates such levels of true terror and realism that it creates something that I feel is really, really, truly unique. And that's one of the real reasons why I love this movie. It's a very unique watch, because you feel like something like this shouldn't exist in the context that it does, and yet it does. That being said, some of the funniest parts of this movie are the things that make absolutely no sense at all, that you can tell they were just kind of playing into pre-existing horror norms, regardless of if they fit logic or, like context of the story. For example, the movie starts with this chase of a little girl through the woods. A little girl who, by the way, cannot stop smiling while she's on camera. And so immediately the first thing I'm noticing is like this little girl like can't stop breaking character because she's smiling as she's being chased by a troll throughout the woods. And so it's this handheld camera. So we have this introduction of like handheld motion of the camera that's very reminiscent of horror movie film techniques. So it's chasing her through the jungle or through the woods. And they capture Trantor, and they give you the information that 4 kids have already been turned into wooden statues, which itself is terrifying, and that this will be a problem like in the future, right? So these 4 kids are already like part of this this horrible curse, and they're turned into wooden figures. And at the end of the movie, when Ernest breaks the curse, these 4 children come out of the tree and see Old Lady Hackmore for the first time and are like, "Oh my god, it's our sister. We're so happy to see you. How did you get so old?" The hilarious part of this to me is that the production design, the way that all the costumes look, the way that people are acting in the very first scene is like Pilgrim times, like 1600s first ever colonization of the United States, where Ernest's uncle is dressed up like as a literal like pilgrim preacher, and then like it transitions to modern day, and we have this bridge of the same character, Old Lady Hackmore, being alive in both timelines. that it's like, when did this first one even take place? Like, based on the year that it came out and how old Lady Hackmore is at this time, the first part could have only taken place in like the 50s at the earliest, and yet all of the people in there are dressed like they're towing the land and like just came off of the Mayflower. And I find that so funny because it's clear, like, they didn't care. They were like, whatever, you get the point. And I think that's also kind of cool and funny because it's just playing again into this horror trope that, like, we think curses and bad things that happen, they're all hundreds of years old. So let's play into this horror trope some more, even though it makes no sense. Or I guess the other side of the story is that you can argue that old Lady Hackmore is somehow under this curse as well and has been alive for 300 years, right? Which I think is another kind of fun take on it. But to me, it's really like, it's so disjointing. Like, these two timelines don't go together at all. But it's like the foundational setup of the story. Another thing that I wanted to talk about today is something that I am a bit jaded about. I'm not going to lie to you. And that is a movie that at the time was also kind of a little bit of a box office failure. But over the years, it has gathered a really strong, dedicated audience, and it's more popular now than it ever has been in the past. And coming out very soon is a sequel to this movie, and that movie is Hocus Pocus. So Hocus Pocus, I'm not gonna lie, I watched it when I was a kid. I like Hocus Pocus. I actively enjoy Hocus Pocus. And if you know anything about me and my podcast tendencies, me and my boy Mick Garris. Mick, if you want to come on the pod, please let me know. He loves talking about Hocus Pocus on his podcast, and because he wrote the first draft of the screenplay back in the early 80s. And so me and my friends have a drinking game where a theoretical drinking game where if we listen, we take a shot anytime Hocus Pocus is mentioned. But Hocus Pocus to me is really interesting because it's become such a cultural icon for Halloween over the years, where people are like traveling to Salem, Massachusetts to see the Hocus Pocus house, and people are still dressing up as the Sanderson sisters, and it's become so popular. It's become a Halloween staple, and I'm very, very, very happy for Hocus Pocus. However, when I watch Ernest Scared Stupid, all I can think about is, damn, Hocus Pocus stole some stuff from Ernest Scared Stupid. Mind you, both released by Disney, both released under the Touchstone banner, at least on home video. And I find striking similarities between these two movies, and Ernest Scared Stupid having come out 2 years before Hocus Pocus, I feel like maybe it deserves a little more credit for this movie that you guys kind of feel like is the jewel of your Halloween childhood. So both movies start with this, flashback into the history of the town in which like a curse is kind of laid out, and then both movies come back to that history being told by someone in the classroom. Both have to do with the curse that take over this town, about the children trying to break this curse. There's a book that's giving people information like throughout the whole story. The feel is very, very, very similar. It has very similar, like cinematography, shots, feels, things like that. And to me, I have a bit of a bone to pick with it because though I do love Hocus Pocus, if you guys haven't seen Ernest Scared Stupid, like, I promise you, it is an amazing experience. It's hilarious. It's terrifying, like way more terrifying than a children's movie should be. Probably scarier than Hocus Pocus. And I just want Ernest Scared Stupid to get that same kind of love, right? Because to me, and I get that there's a nostalgia part of it too, but to me, Ernest was my crown jewel of like Halloween childhood. And I think with so many similarities between the two, and one, Hocus Pocus clearly pulling influence off of Hocus Pocus, I think it's really important to get this back into the popularity for Halloween movies and get it recirculated. Last year we had a Nightmare Network film festival in my backyard where I shot a bunch of horror shorts, and One of them actually just got accepted into a festival, and we're really excited about that. We're going to be posting it on our socials, kind of once it goes through the festival circuit and everything like that. But it was a big party, and before we kind of screened our own short films, I made it a point to screen Ernest Scared Stupid before we got into anything else, because that was my Halloween tradition, and that's what I wanted to share with everyone. Were there calls for Hocus Pocus? Maybe. But was anyone disappointed in Ernest Scared Stupid taken front and center on the giant inflatable screen in our backyard with that beautiful soundtrack just bursting through the speakers? I don't think so. Everybody walked away from that party feeling very, very happy. So this whole narrative kind of evolves from the silliness of Ernest into this kind of big showdown that they have at the tree where Trantor succeeds in getting all of his children, and he turns them all into horrifying stasis cubes of wood where their souls are trapped inside, puts them inside of a tree, and it births this army of trolls that now Ernest and the kids from the town, after discovering that the weakness to the trolls is milk, not, as Ernest thinks, authentic Bulgarian miak, which I learned in research is a real thing. It's some sort of like weird yogurtish type thing from Bulgaria. Also, one of my favorite things in the world is to hear that Trantor and Ernest in the gymnasium about to have a showdown, like a literal gunslinger showdown, and Trantor thinks he's finally figured him out, and he's gonna pull out a thing of milk, and he pulls out this elaborate glass bottle of authentic Bulgarian miak. Bet you thought I couldn't find any this time of year, but I'm a little too. And then he gets knocked into the ice cream machine. But ironically, if it is some kind of yogurt, it would have dairy in it, therefore would have an effect on Trantor. I'm gonna have to, I think I might have to live stream a video on our Instagram of me trying authentic Bulgarian miak and letting you guys know how it is. If you'd be interested in that, please like and subscribe. But so they have this big showdown at the end, and there's these really cool kind of instead of giving them guns, they give them or weapons, they give them milk. So there's this one scene of this kid tossing a milk carton into a car like it was a grenade, and these kind of really obscure interpretations of violence with milk, which I think is funny. And also, Kenny's dad, who's the sheriff of the town, is the worst cop ever. Ernest comes to him with a garbage truck early in the movie, and he's like, "I got a troll in the back of this truck. We should check it out." And he's like, "All right, open it up. I'm gonna draw my gun, so in case there's a troll in the back of this garbage truck, I can shoot it." Turns out it's two small children, as it should be, two small children. I know we like to vilify the adults in horror movies for not believing things, but in no context should that man have drawn his weapon at a quote unquote troll in the back of the garbage truck. And then at the end, he somehow loses his gun to the trolls and gets handcuffed to his own car. Oh man, he's just, terrible cop. This kid's cool though, because this kid comes in and saves the day with his milk water guns, shooting them all over the place. And one thing that leads up to this moment that I really, really have to stress is Rimshot, Ernest's dog. I would die for Rimshot. Rimshot is the most adorable little puppy in the world who is saving Ernest's butt most of the movie. He is driving cars. He is being bait as a cute little Boy Scout, and he's troll bait. He's carrying the team, really. Rimshot is, and then at that showdown in the gym, Trantor catches Rimshot and turns him into a little wooden figure, and my heart breaks. You wouldn't think you'd have that kind of emotional response from an Ernest movie, but the second that Rimshot is turned into a little stasis cube wood, it's so sad. I can't even get. I'm upset right now. It's been years, and I can't get over Rimshot being turned into that. And so we have this part in the story where that turns Ernest into a revenge-seeking savage, which to me feels kind of weird. And it all kind of leads to him and the kids using using milk as a weapon to kind of get rid of all the trolls and everything, right? And to me, I guess watching it again, it did feel kind of weird that Ernest was wielding weapons to get rid of these things, even though obviously the trolls needed to be dispersed of, but he becomes vengeful because of Rimshot, and to me that always felt kind of weird. And so eventually Kenny gets turned into a wooden figure as well, and Ernest and all the other ones are taken care of, and Trantor makes a deal with the demons and turns him into final form Trantor, which is actually super terrifying. And there's this harsh spot backlight from him that really puts forward all of his horns and makes them very defined, and he's actually terrifying. And it kind of makes me realize that it has Wendigo vibes to it, there's a very naturalist horror going on in this movie, that we have these pods growing from the earth creating evil, and we have these, this horned troll, very much like earthy troll, and it has a naturalistic horror to it that I think it is just another example of how there was a clear vision of horror in this Ernest movie, where they knew they wanted to kind of focus on the earth and naturalistic types of terror, where the kids are being turned into wood, right? That they're returning to the ground, and the final form of Trantor really kind of I think hits that home. And it's really cool to me to see they very clearly had a clear vision for horror. It wasn't just all right, we're gonna make this a spooky Ernest movie. There were rumors based on original printings of promotions at the time that it came out that it was going to be about Ernest with inheriting a haunted house, which would have been a fun, but I think we all know what kind of movie that would be. But this one really changed directions and made it a very specific naturalistic horror movie. And I think that's so cool when you watch it, to kind of experience that hybrid of child but very, very focused horror vision. So Ernest becomes this kind of vengeful person, and after Kenny is turned into this wooden thing, he's all right, I have this milk in my hand and we're gonna have a showdown. And then he finally realizes, based on this this Book of Shadows book that's been coming out, that he needs to show him unconditional love to beat him. Instead of choosing violence, he needs to choose love, which is so on brand for Ernest, right? He's innocent, and he's the innocent man-child, and he's the epitome of things that are good, of actions that we should take even if they make us look silly, right? Don't be afraid to be a child if being an adult isn't the right thing, right? And so that, to me, that's Ernest. And instead of choosing violence, Ernest chooses love. And there is something so magical about watching Ernest waltz to this orchestrated version of the theme song with the troll, and finally ending it with a beautiful little smooch on his lips. You were wondering how I was going to tie this into Valentine's Day, how this was going to be my Valentine's Day episode, and it is the beautiful romance between Ernest and Trantor the troll. So they have this beautiful kiss, and Trantor explodes, and all of the children come back to life, and Rimshot comes back, and the reuniting of Ernest and Rimshot plucks at my heartstrings, and we just have this really nice ending to a real horror movie. It's a real horror movie, and that's something I want you to take away from today, listening to me talk about an Ernest movie, is that this is a real horror movie, and you can tell the filmmakers were making conscious decisions about the vision of not only it being a horror movie, but the type of horror movie that it wanted to be. Whether it's through themes of naturalistic horror or score or production design or makeup, everything was planned, and it was not taken for granted, which I think falls to the wayside in a lot of other quote unquote child horror movies. I think this one really hits the nail on the head. And so when I was making my lists of movies that I wanted to do for season 2 of Nightmare Network, there were a few wild cards on the list. One of them coming up in a few weeks is Spotlight, which to me, which is not a traditional horror movie, but to me, the experience of watching it for the first time was nothing but horrific. And another thing that I wanted to do was tackle Ernest Scared Stupid, because that to me is what Nightmare Network should be all about, right? It should be recontextualizing these movies that maybe we haven't seen or we haven't seen in a long time, that don't fit our definition of what typical horror should be, and re-looking at it and reliving our fun memories, our fun experiences of these movies, regardless of how we see them fitting within the horror sphere. So I hope you guys really enjoyed today's episode. It was super fun for me to talk about my boy Ernest, and to say R.I.P. Jim Varney, you are sorely missed, and I wish we could have had Ernest movies. And if I am ever fortunate enough to be like a serious filmmaker, I want you to know this is my promise to you. I will make 2 really serious independent horror dramas and reboot the Ernest franchise with a new generation of Ernest. That is my promise to you. So thank you guys for tuning in. Happy Valentine's Day to all you lovers out there. Make sure you find the troll of your dreams, and we will scare you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Season 2 of Nightmare Network. Remember to like and subscribe, and follow us on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for updates regarding all things terrifying. Is there a movie or TV series you want us to talk about on our podcast? DM us and let us know. Remember, here at Nightmare Network, you share your scares.